Now broadcasting from the Next Gen Conservative Studio in sunny South Florida, bringing you the latest in politics, current events, and pop culture. This is the Whitfield Report with Sam Whitfield.
Hey guys, welcome to this Thursday edition of the Whitfield Report. I am your host, Sam Whitfield, and I just want to do a quick follow-up to the No Time to Die episode that I did with Mark and Sean Semenko. So obviously this will kind of be a spoilery episode. One thing I want to kind of just cover real quick is mainly the reaction that people had to James Bond's death. And aside from the fact that they killed James Bond, right, which is crazy, and many fans are mixed about that, itself, including me. I don't like the fact that they killed off Bond. Mark didn't like that fact. And neither did Sean. No one I know who I've talked to in the Bond community is really a fan of that concept either. However, what's interesting to me is the fact that as far as deaths go, James Bond's death wasn't really earned in that movie. And what do I mean by that? This was a point that someone actually brought up to me in a Discord server. I can't remember the username of the person, so I apologize. But I think one of the biggest issues that people had with James Bond's death, aside from the fact that they killed off James Bond, was the fact that the death wasn't earned. And what I mean by that, and what this individual brought up to me, was the fact that this death kind of seemed pointless, right? James gets infected with the nanite virus, with these nanites, and then pretty much chooses to just commit suicide and let the missiles kill him because he can't be with Madeline and his daughter. Because if he touches them, they'll die, obviously. So it's like the Disney cursed MacGuffin type thing that Mark brought up. And it seems like Bond almost chooses to die because, if I can't be with Madeline and my daughter, there's no point in being alive, so I might as well die. Right? That's kind of how that death, came about, rather than, get off the island, Bond, and we can't get the nanites, out of you, but we'll try and figure out some way to get them out of you, in the future. I feel like that, maybe is what should have happened. It still could have been, bittersweet to where, Bond couldn't be with Madeline and had maybe to live in seclusion, but that would have been better than killing Bond off. So Bond's death kind of seemed selfish. It was kind of like Bond got sad and was like, I don't want to live anymore because I can't be with Madeline, right? So the death wasn't really earned. Now, what do I mean by an earned death? Well, take, for example, Avengers Endgame, which, if you haven't seen it by now, major spoilers. But the conclusion of Avengers Endgame ends with the death of Tony Stark and Iron Man. And this death, well, impactful, and also kind of a holy shit moment for the, Marvel fans out there, myself included. It was sad, but it also felt justified. Why? Because Tony Stark ended up giving his life for the greater good, really for the entire planet. He sacrificed himself in the heat of battle to defeat Thanos. And really, if you think about it, the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe, up until Endgame, really kind of revolved around Tony Stark's story arc and, Captain America and the rest of the Avengers who, in one way or another, all made personal sacrifices. And Tony just happened to make the ultimate one. His death, well, sad and well tragic, and it bummed the fans. It bummed out the fans that he, was gone from the MCU forever. It felt earned because of the weight of everything that Tony had been through as Iron Man, right? We saw him start his hero's journey in the first Iron Man movie, continue that, in the Iron Man in the other two Iron Man movies, which, we can debate whether or not those are good films. And then in the Avengers, he makes mistakes. Age of Ultron, same thing. Right, but we see Tony Stark evolve as a character. We see him develop. So he goes from being an arrogant playboy to a superhero, to a flawed leader, to a hero again, to really being the savior of humanity. And his death is very much worthwhile. And the weight of his sacrifice is noted. So he definitely earned his death. Whereas Daniel Craig, while I like him as Bond, it does seem a little weird to me that after all this time, his mission to take down Spectre is essentially more or less a personal revenge type of mission for Spectre ultimately killing Vesper in Casino Royale, which is odd because, as Mark and I mentioned, Quantum of Solace was supposedly the, kind of Bond getting over her, right, and moving on from her. Yet we see at the beginning of No Time to Die that he is still haunted by her, and that is one of the reasons why he is, against Spectre, because in his mind, they are ultimately responsible for her death. Right? And then Madeline is supposedly the love of his life, right? We kind of see them develop a romance in Spectre, and then we pick up in No Time to Die where they've been living together in Italy for the past 5 years. But then Spectre comes after them, and Bond, thinks that she's betrayed him, and then he goes off into seclusion on his own for like another 5 years. And, there's this whole like kind of like ex-lover, feud between them up until he finds out that, she has a kid and that it may be his, and they kind of fall in love again, and they don't really explain that real well. And then at the end of the day, he can't even be with her, and he essentially decides, because of this nanite virus, he can't be with him and his daughter. So rather than, kind of sacrificing himself for queen and country, as Bond would do, he, kind of just lays down and dies because he can't be with the woman he loves, right? And that to me is kind of just selfish, and now that I've had more time to think about it, very out of character for Bond. It's just another thing that I have issues with. The other thing is if you think about it, Safin is the one who drove Bond to his death. And that's very weird because, in all honesty, I think Safin was okay. There are certainly worse Bond villains out there, like Dominic Green. But Safin does not seem like the type to, be worthy of besting Bond or leading Bond to his death. He's not Le Chiffre, and he's not Raul Silva, Javier Bardem, who in my mind is still the best villain of the Craig saga, right? This death would have been much more impactful had someone like Silva been the mastermind of all this. And, Bond would have had to maybe fight Silva to the death to save Madeline and, save Queen and the country. Nothing was at risk for Bond to sacrifice himself, really. I mean, the fact that he couldn't be with his family was a factor, but again, it wasn't the same thing as a sacrifice. All he had to do was not go near his, family, which, yeah, sucks for him, but that's not the same thing as giving your life in the line of duty, so to speak. So, like I said, I'm trying not to ramble, here too much, but, this is another reason why Bond's death doesn't really work. It's just not a proper hero's death, and then, as we said last week on the podcast, the fact that they killed, off Craig's Bond in the first place was kind of a slap in the face. And, now that Craig's era is over, Craig will be, largely remembered now, unfortunately, as the Bond who ends up dying. I've rewatched Casino Royale. I rewatched it the other night. Casino Royale is a great movie. It's still one of the best Bond movies out there. But now rewatching it, it's a great movie, but in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, what a great beginning for a character, but geez, what a great beginning to what ends up being a sucky sucky ending. So, I don't know. Those are just kind of my final wrap-up thoughts on the death of James Bond. Just some more final thoughts to wrap things up. Thank you guys for listening to this podcast, and if you are listening to this on Spotify, please answer my question below and let me know what you guys thought of Bond's death, right? And suppose, right, we all know that the idea of Bond being killed off, we know that sucks to begin with, right? But as far as like movie deaths go, do you think it was even a good movie death, or like me, do you think it was kind of anticlimactic? I would love to hear your responses to that. Again, if you're on Spotify, you can just reply to that directly. If you're not, send me your tweets, and messages like on Twitter or on Discord, and if you're in the Bond server, and just let me know. Love hearing from you guys. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys for the Saturday show. Live stream 10 p.m. Eastern on the YouTube channel. Oh, and also, we also now have a premium subscription available on Spotify, so please consider subscribing to that. I'll have the link so that you guys can subscribe and support the show. Thank you very much. God bless. God save this great nation. God, freedom, legacy, in that order, and I'll see you on the next show.
Thanks for listening to The Whitfield Report on the NGC Network. Please visit Sam's website at www.thesamwhitfield.com and support Sam on Patreon at patreon.com/Whitfield Report. Until next time, God bless, God save this great nation, and God, freedom, legacy, in that order.